The message came through at 7:42 p.m. I was just sitting on my couch, sipping on some chamomile tea, trying to calm my nerves before what was supposed to be my sister's big day. I wasn't expecting anything. No drama. No stings. But then my phone buzzed, and there it was, a short, cold text from my father. "You're not coming to the wedding. Your sister's family doesn't want you there." That was it. No explanation. No apologies. Just a message that hit harder than any punch ever could. For a few seconds, I stared at the screen, not blinking, not breathing. The words repeated themselves in my head until they blurred. I wasn't angry, not at first. I was stunned. Like someone had flipped a switch and all the warmth I ever knew had gone cold. I looked around the apartment I lived in alone, simple, clean, modest. Everything I had worked for. There were no handouts, no easy passes, no family dinners where everyone lifted their glass in my honor. That was for them, my sister, Marissa, the golden child with the perfect hair, the designer clothes, and now, the perfect wedding. I could almost hear her voice echoing in my memory, "Don't make things weird, okay? Just stay quiet during the toast. And don't wear anything that'll draw attention." That was a month ago when she kindly invited me, as a formality. But this? Being cut out? Not just uninvited, but humiliated? My father, my own blood, chose appearances over me. That stung. But it also clarified everything. So I texted back. My fingers didn't hesitate, didn't shake. I typed it slow, but steady, "So you chose status over blood?" Then I hit send. I leaned back. My heart didn't race, it steadied. It was like my soul stopped waiting to be loved by people who only knew how to use and discard. That message wasn't just my response. It was the start of something. The release of every apology I ever forced out of myself for being too loud, too different, too real. And I smiled. It wasn't a smile of bitterness. It was relief. Freedom. The kind that comes when you stop begging people to see your worth. I opened my laptop. 3 clicks later, I was in the dashboard of the event planning system. Guess whose card paid the venue deposit? Mine. "Because we'll pay you back, sweetie, it's just for the reservation," and like a fool, I agreed. I even helped pick the place. The Grand Oak Estate. Elegant. Expensive. Non-refundable unless cancelled 48 hours in advance. The wedding was in 36. Click. Cancel reservation. Click. Send refund confirmation to my email, not theirs. Click. Remove auto access to wedding itinerary I helped build. I didn't need revenge. Not yet. Not the loud kind anyway. But this? This was the first domino. The soft, satisfying sound of a table being flipped before anyone even knew I stood up. Let the silence before the storm begin. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly, texts from my mom, missed calls from my cousin Jenna, and one very long, frantic voicemail from Marissa. I didn't need to listen. I knew exactly what it was about. The Grand Oak Estate had just informed them that the venue was cancelled by the cardholder, and the date was no longer available. No refunds. No exceptions. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out the window. Funny how quiet the world seemed when your entire family was screaming on the other side of it. They didn't know yet that it was me. Not officially. But deep down, I knew Marissa suspected. After all, I was the one who had originally found the place, made the deposit, and organized everything from the catering to the floral arrangements. She hadn't lifted a finger. She didn't need to. Not when I was around to handle the boring parts of her dream day. I could almost hear her screaming. I imagined her running around in her matching satin bridesmaid robes, yelling at her friends, checking her email obsessively, calling the estate again and again, trying to find someone, anyone, who could fix what had been broken. But no one could. The calendar was booked for months. That estate was one of the most sought-after venues in the entire state. And now it was gone. Just like that. I didn't feel guilty. Not even for a second. Because while they were scrambling, I was remembering. Remembering every moment I'd been pushed aside, every family dinner where my seat was an afterthought, every birthday I spent alone while they posted party pictures for Marissa's golden celebrations. I remembered our last Thanksgiving, when my father asked me to just not bring up politics or anything controversial because we want to keep things light. And what he really meant was, don't be yourself. You embarrass us. The memories hurt. But not as much as they used to. Now, they were like scars. Still visible, but no longer bleeding. I started getting texts like, "Mom, what did you do? We need to talk. Now. Jenna, was that you? Please tell me you didn't do anything crazy. Marissa, if this is you, you're dead to me." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I pulled up my journal and wrote down one sentence. Let them taste what they served me for years: rejection, silence, and the feeling of being less. The wedding was in 2 days. Or, it was supposed to be. They'd scrambled to find a backup, maybe some local hall or a hotel ballroom. But it wouldn't be Grand Oak. It wouldn't be perfect. And no matter what they patched together, Marissa would know something went wrong. Something big. And someone was behind it. I wanted her to guess. I wanted my father to sit in his tuxedo, fuming behind forced smiles, knowing that whatever power he thought he had over me, it was gone. The curtain hadn't even risen yet. And the best part? They still had no idea what was coming next. 2 days later, the photos began surfacing on social media. A dull, cramped banquet hall with low ceilings and folding chairs, not exactly the dream setting Marissa had been pinning on her wedding board for the past year. She tried her best to fake the smiles, but even in the photos, her eyes looked tired, her dress wrinkled from the heat, and the cake, was a lopsided mess compared to the 5-tier masterpiece she had originally ordered. I sipped my tea and scrolled through the hashtags, #stillmagical, #bridevibes, #lovewins. But even the filters couldn't hide the disaster. Then came the group family photo. Everyone lined up, still trying to salvage what they could of the moment. I wasn't there, of course. I hadn't been invited. But that didn't stop me from making my presence felt. The real twist came after the wedding, when the bills started rolling in. My father's credit card had been linked to several of the vendors, because it was supposed to be just a temporary thing while I coordinated. He never changed it. And I had made a few phone calls. The non-refundable deposits? Gone. The second cake that never arrived? Still charged. The photographer they'd fired in panic and replaced last minute? Double booked. And the sound system? Well, let's just say silence has never been so expensive. That's when the phone calls started again, only now, my father's voice was no longer cold and indifferent, it was angry. Furious. He called me one evening, voice shaking. "You think you can do this to your own family and walk away? You embarrassed us. You humiliated your sister." I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, "You did that all by yourselves the moment you chose appearances over your own daughter." He paused. For once, he had no comeback. Then, he hung up. I leaned back and smiled. Because here's what they didn't understand, this wasn't about the wedding. This wasn't even about revenge, not really. This was about finally being seen. For years, I had played the part. The quiet daughter. The responsible one. The helper. The girl who arranged the centerpieces but never got invited to the main table. Who got hand-me-downs while Marissa got spotlights. Who was told she was too sensitive, too opinionated, too much. But not anymore. I was done playing small. And now, every time they looked at those wedding photos, they'd remember me, not because I was there, but because I wasn't. Because I had been erased, and then I reminded them what that feels like. The wedding might have gone ahead, but the story had changed. I wasn't the afterthought anymore. I was the missing piece that made everything fall apart. And they still didn't know, I wasn't finished yet. A week after the wedding, I received a voicemail from my mother. Her voice trembled as she said, "Honey, I don't know what's going on, but your father is very upset. Can we please talk?" I didn't respond. It wasn't that I didn't care. Deep down, a part of me still ached for her voice, for her warmth. But I remembered too well how she had quietly agreed when Dad decided I wasn't welcome at the wedding. How she had texted me a simple, "Try to understand, sweetie," instead of standing up for me. Understanding was something I'd done my entire life. Now, it was their turn. While they tried to clean up the mess I left behind, I focused on building something new, something entirely mine. 6 months earlier, I had begun working on a startup with 2 other women I'd met at a tech conference. Women like me, overlooked, underestimated, but fiercely intelligent. We'd pooled our savings, skills, and contacts, and launched a platform focused on mental wellness tools for caregivers, especially daughters like me, sandwiched between aging parents and their own dreams. And now, after months of hard work and sleepless nights, we had just secured a major investor. One whose backing not only brought financial power but credibility. We weren't just another women's wellness app. We were a movement. The irony? That investor was none other than Mrs. Langford, CEO of the very corporation where my father had worked for over 2 decades. I had met her months ago at a local event. She liked my pitch, but more than that, she liked me. She believed in me. That belief was about to change everything. One afternoon, as I walked into her office to sign the final deal, she smiled warmly and said, "I hear you had a bit of family drama recently. I don't need to know the details. Just know, sometimes, families don't realize the value of their own blood until it's too late." I blinked, holding back the lump in my throat, and nodded. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She leaned back and folded her hands. "Just wait till your father hears who his new boss is." I froze. "What do you mean?" She grinned. "Did I forget to mention? Your dad's division just got acquired by our company. As of next month, he reports to our regional office, which you now own a 10% stake in." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My silence was loud. This wasn't a plan I had orchestrated, it was poetic justice rolling out on its own. And for once, the universe had my back. At that moment, everything clicked. The venue. The text. The years of silence and cold shoulders. All of it had led here. Soon, the same father who told me I didn't belong at a wedding would walk into work and find out I wasn't just part of the company. I was one of the owners. And this time, it would be him watching from the back. The morning my father walked into the office and saw me in the executive conference room was a moment I'll never forget. I was seated at the head of the table, reviewing documents with Mrs. Langford and our legal team. I wore a tailored navy blue blazer, my hair pulled back in a professional twist, and a calm smile that didn't hint at the storm inside me. He paused at the doorway, stunned. His briefcase dangled in one hand, forgotten, and his face turned pale as our eyes locked. "Dad," I said smoothly, my tone professional, "come on in. We were just getting started." Mrs. Langford didn't skip a beat. "Walter, you've met our new strategic partner, haven't you? She'll be taking point on integrating the wellness initiatives we've discussed. You'll be working closely with her from now on." He tried to gather himself, clearing his throat and offering a tight nod. "Yes. I've, heard good things." I watched him carefully. The pride that used to light up his face whenever my sister walked into a room was missing. In its place was confusion, discomfort, and something new, respect, maybe even regret. We continued the meeting as if nothing had happened. But every time I spoke, I saw the way he tensed. Every time Mrs. Langford praised my ideas, I saw his jaw clench a little tighter. Afterward, as the others filtered out, he lingered behind. "I didn't know," he said finally, voice low. "I didn't know this was what you were working on." "No," I replied, "you didn't. Because you never asked." He shifted uncomfortably. We just wanted the wedding to be smooth. There was already so much pressure. So you cut me out, I said plainly. Because I wasn't shiny enough. Because I wouldn't fit in the pictures. That's not true. But it is. You picked optics over blood. You sent me a cold text instead of a phone call. And now, the same girl you thought was an embarrassment, you work for her team. Silence hung thick in the air. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said softly. But you did, I said, standing. And you never apologized. You still haven't. His eyes searched my face, but I didn't flinch. I can't go back and change it, he said, helpless. No, I agreed. But you can sit with the consequences. And with that, I left him standing in the room alone, just as I had once stood in the shadows, uninvited, unwanted. As I walked down the hallway, staff nodded respectfully. I wasn't just someone's daughter anymore. I was a partner. A force. Someone who had been pushed aside, only to rise higher than they'd ever imagined. I didn't need revenge. Life had handed it to me. My voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. My presence wasn't flashy, but it was powerful. And this time, it was my name that carried weight in the room. The wedding day finally arrived, bright and grand, just as they had planned it without me. My sister's venue was decked out in blush and gold, guests arrived in designer suits, and the scent of roses lingered heavy in the air. But underneath all that gloss was a secret no one had seen coming. Not yet. I hadn't just cancelled the deposit earlier. No, I had done far more. I'd waited until the last possible moment, just before the final vendor payments were due. I had used my position and connections to delay every transaction they assumed was done. And I'd bought out the venue's entire upcoming month under a different name. So when the wedding planner received a panicked call from the catering team saying they were locked out of the kitchen, and then another from the florist saying they had been rerouted, confusion started to set in. But it all came crashing down when the venue manager walked up to my father with a clipboard and said, "I'm sorry, sir. We don't have your event scheduled for today." "What are you talking about?" he barked. "We've had this booked for 8 months. I understand, but the reservation was cancelled weeks ago. The full refund was processed." Refund? By who? The person who originally paid for it. My sister, in her white gown, was standing just a few steps away when she heard that. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted in disbelief. Wait, what? It was then that I stepped forward. I didn't come to ruin anything. I came to finish something. I wore a sleek black dress, nothing flashy, just elegant. Heads turned. Whispers spread. I didn't flinch. "You," my sister hissed. "You did this?" I looked at her calmly. "You didn't want me at the wedding. So, I didn't come. I just made sure it didn't happen either." "You're insane," she spat. "No. I'm just done being treated like an afterthought." My dad stepped between us. "You're going too far." I raised a hand. "No. You did, when you chose her status over your daughter's soul. You made your choice. This is mine." Guests around us murmured, unsure whether to side with the embarrassed bride or the calm woman who just dismantled an entire illusion. And then, as if the universe had timed it perfectly, a sleek black car pulled up behind me. Out stepped Mrs. Langford, smiling. "Shall we, Madison? Our real guests are waiting." My sister blinked. "Guests?" I turned, pausing just enough to say, "Yes. I'm hosting a small event tonight. A celebration of integrity and new beginnings." As we drove off, I looked back just once. My father's face was blank. My sister's was twisted in rage. They hadn't seen it coming. But I had waited, planned, and struck with precision. And the best part? This wasn't about ruining their day. It was about reclaiming mine. The night unfolded like a scene from a movie, perfect, poised, and full of bittersweet satisfaction. As we entered the elegant private venue I had rented, Mrs. Langford, my loyal ally in this calculated plan, clinked her champagne glass in the air. The room, flooded with my closest colleagues and business partners, was filled with laughter and light. The decor was simple but sophisticated, exactly how I wanted it. It wasn't flashy, but it radiated genuine elegance. "Here's to new beginnings," Mrs. Langford said with a smile, raising her glass. The guests toasted, and I stood in the center of it all, finally feeling the weight of everything I had fought for lift from my shoulders. This wasn't just a party. It was a declaration. It was the quiet proof that I had no need for their approval. I had my own life, my own successes, and my own power. And I was no longer invisible. The evening was flawless. But as the night wore on, I couldn't help but feel a cold satisfaction stirring within me. This wasn't just a celebration of freedom, it was the slow but steady destruction of everything my father had built on the foundation of his pride. I glanced over at Mrs. Langford, who winked back knowingly. She understood. She had seen what it had cost me to get here. She knew the sacrifices, the late nights, and the sleepless hours spent alone, trying to prove myself in a world that only valued the legacy of names. And the best part was, the entire evening had been orchestrated in perfect secrecy. My father and sister, completely unaware, had no clue what was going on behind their backs. I had taken everything from them, not in a loud, rebellious way, but through the most satisfying form of revenge, simply stepping aside and letting them drown in their own pride and ignorance. As I walked through the venue, exchanging pleasantries with clients and colleagues, the thought of the wedding, which had been intended to showcase their version of perfection, felt more like an afterthought. My sister's perfect wedding day? It was nothing now. The flowers were dead. The caterers were still standing by the venue's doors, locked out. No, this was my moment. This was my victory. Halfway through the night, a message appeared on my phone. It was from my father. "Please, we're sorry. We've been trying to reach you. The wedding, everything, it's falling apart. Come back. We need you." The message stung, but I didn't let it show. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. For years, I had been the one they pushed aside, treated like I wasn't important enough. But now, with the weight of the world shifting in my favor, I understood the truth. The world had kept turning just fine without their validation. And I didn't need them to complete me. As the night came to an end, and the last few guests filtered out, I stood at the front door of the venue, gazing out at the city skyline. I felt powerful, confident. No one could take this from me now. And deep inside, I knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of something far bigger than any wedding could ever be. They had no idea what they'd lost. But I did. And that was enough. The following week was the calm after the storm. The days blurred together as my phone remained silent, with no more texts from my father or sister. It was as if they had disappeared, swallowed up by their own mess. My life, however, had never been more focused. The first major shift came on Monday when I received a call from the bank. My lawyer had successfully made the final arrangements to solidify my ownership of the family company, a company my father had built, and now it was mine. My hands trembled slightly as I signed the final documents, but the feeling of power and control surged through me like a rush of adrenaline. The name on the letterhead had changed. My name. I hung up the phone and sat back, taking a deep breath. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about showing them I was better. It was about the recognition I'd always been denied. I had done it on my own terms, without their help or approval. The next day, I received a call from my sister. Her voice was strained, unlike the usual arrogance she'd once carried. "Why would you do this to us? You've ruined everything. The wedding's off. Dad can't stop talking about it. You've embarrassed the family." I leaned back in my chair, a soft smile forming on my lips. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. "Didn't you tell me to stay away?" I asked coolly. "Didn't you make it clear that I wasn't welcome? Seems like your words came back to bite you. You don't get to control me anymore. I'm done." I could hear her gasp, but before she could say anything else, I ended the call. I wasn't interested in hearing her whine about how their carefully constructed world was falling apart. I wasn't their backup plan anymore. Later that week, I received a message from my father. It was heartfelt, pleading, but with an edge of desperation that made me wonder how far they'd fallen. "Please, come back," he wrote. "This company was meant for you. We were wrong about you. We need you here." I stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. It was too little, too late. They had made their choices. Their pride, their obsession with status, had pushed me out. Now they were the ones in need. And I wasn't going to fix it for them. I hadn't just taken over the company. I had also taken back the life I had always deserved. The life they had stolen from me. As I stood in my new office that day, looking out over the city, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The weight of years of bitterness and resentment had evaporated. What had once been their kingdom was now mine. The boardroom where my father had sat, commanding respect, was now mine to command. I wasn't angry anymore. I had everything I needed to succeed, and there was no longer any need for revenge. This was my victory. My moment. And as I gazed out the window, I knew this was only the beginning of a new chapter. I had no interest in looking back. They had chosen status over family, and I had chosen myself. And in the end, that was all I really needed.